Year 2015, a modern European country. The story of a financial collapse. Most banks shut down. Withdrawing cash had become almost impossible. Ration cards were distributed so people could withdraw their own money. Pensions for retirees could no longer be paid. The country known as the birthplace of democracy, the cradle of philosophy and money, was fighting for survival against international creditors. Yes, you guessed it. This is Greece, that a member of the European Union, using the euro, perhaps the world's strongest currency, yet on the verge of bankruptcy, like an empire living out its final days. So how did it happen? How does a developed country become dependent on one bailout after another while using the same currency as Germany and France? And why should we care, even if we've never set foot in Athens? Because the collapse in Greece was not just a local crisis. That IT was a modern case study of how the global financial system works, how debt is turned into a political weapon, and how quickly a country's sovereignty can evaporate when money runs out. That let's rewind. The first sparks of the crisis ignited long before they reached newspaper headlines. In 2001, Greece joined the euro and suddenly gained access to borrowing at interest rates it had never seen before. For decades, Greece had been a highly indebted country with massive budget deficits. But inside the Eurozone, markets assumed the risk was shared. Investors behaved as if Greek bonds were almost as safe as German bonds. Suddenly, Greece could borrow at the lowest interest rates in its history, and it did. Public spending exploded. Infrastructure projects entered a golden age. Public sector salaries skyrocketed. Some of the money went to roads, airports, and modernization, but most of it fed a dysfunctional bureaucracy and an inefficient tax system. Corruption and tax evasion became widespread. State revenues could not cover expenses. Beneath the optimism of the 2000s, debt kept piling up in 2008. The collapse of Lehman Brothers triggered a domino effect and a global financial crisis. But when the shock arrived, Greece already had one of the largest deficits in the Eurozone. Investors began examining government debt more closely. When they looked at Greece, the numbers simply didn't add up in 2009. It was revealed that Greece had been hiding and underreporting its deficit for years. The real figure was close to 15% of GDP, far beyond EU rules. Trust vanished. Borrowing costs soared. Greece was shut out of financial markets in 2010. With no other option left, Greece asked for help from the IMF and the European Union. But bailout packages never come for free. The first package totaled 110 billion euros, and the conditions were brutal. Deep austerity measures, tax hikes, pension cuts, and labor market liberalization. These policies were supposed to reduce deficits and restore confidence. Instead, they pushed Greece into an even deeper recession. GDP collapsed. Unemployment soared, exceeding 27% by 2013. Youth unemployment climbed past 60%. Public services began to break down. And on top of all this, the debt, the very thing the bailouts were meant to fix, kept growing. Because when an economy shrinks, the debt to GDP ratio worsens. That's simply how the math works. In 2012, a second bailout followed. Another 130 billion euros arrived. Private bondholders took the largest haircut in financial history. It was an undeclared default, yet the debt burden remained unbearable. The crisis dragged on for years. Each new rescue came with deeper austerity, stricter conditions, and weaker growth. By 2015, the left-wing Syriza government came to power and took the creditors' proposal to a referendum. The answer was a landslide no. But days later, Greece accepted an even harsher deal. Why? Because the alternative was to leave the euro, return to the drachma, and declare full default. A move that would have triggered immediate chaos. Greece's economic sovereignty had effectively ended. Budgeting, taxation, and spending were now dictated by the Troika, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF. What happened to Greece was not new. Debt has long been a tool of power. Control without armies in the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire followed a similar path. After repeated defaults, European creditors took control of customs revenues to the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. Money that once funded sovereignty was redirected toward debt repayment. The same happened in Egypt during the 1870s. Massive borrowing for railways and the Suez Canal led to default. Britain and France stepped in, first as creditors, then as rulers in both cases. The empire survived on paper. Flags still flew. Leaders still spoke. But real power belonged to creditors. In the 2010s, Greece experienced the same reality. There was no military occupation, only financial guardianship. The Troika became a shadow government, deciding what could be spent, what had to be cut, and how fast debts would be repaid. For ordinary Greeks, the crisis was merciless. Pensions were slashed. Hospitals ran out of basic supplies. Thousands of small businesses collapsed. The social fabric was torn, yet the debt remained. Even today, Greece's debt-to-GDP ratio exceeds 160%. The economy has stabilized, but at a far lower level. Survival came at the cost of a lost decade. Why does this still matter? Because the same forces are at work today. Developing countries across the globe struggle under debt and IMF programs. The names change. The structure does not. Even advanced economies are not immune. Italy carries massive debt. Japan's public debt exceeds 250% of GDP. The United States, protected by reserve currency privilege, still exceeds $38 trillion in debt. Large economies can postpone reckoning. Postponement is not immunity. The lesson is simple. Greece's crisis was not merely about numbers. It was about lost flexibility. If you cannot print money, cannot devalue, and rely on external financing to function, real control slips away. Debt feels effortless in good times. But when trust disappears, creditors stop being lenders and start becoming decision makers. The same logic applies to individuals. Debt reduces freedom. It narrows choices. It binds you to someone else's conditions, as Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent once said. He who borrows today is doomed to take orders tomorrow. Greece did not fall like an ancient empire. Its army did not scatter. Its walls were not breached. But in practice, it surrendered sovereignty, and it happened inside one of the world's most developed economic systems, under institutions created to prevent precisely this outcome. History repeats itself, and when a modern country defaults like an empire, you are reminded just how fragile financial freedom truly is.